I'm not ashamed to own my Lord, nor to defend his cause. Maintain the honors of his word, the glory of his cross.
Today we're going to be discussing 1 Kings chapter 16, verses 29 to 34. But before we do that, let's read the passage. If you have a Bible with you, you can turn to 1 Kings chapter 16, verse 29. But if you don't have a Bible, don't worry. Just follow along with us on the screen. The version that we'll be reading from is the New King James Version. So 1 Kings chapter 16, beginning at verse 29. In the 38th year of Asa, king of Judah, Ahab the son of Omri became king over Israel. And Ahab the son of Omri reigned over Israel and Samaria 22 years. Now Ahab the son of Omri did evil in the sight of the Lord more than all who were before him. And it came to pass, as though it had been a trivial thing for him to walk in the sins of Jeroboam the son of Nebat, that he took as wife Jezebel the daughter of Ethbaal, king of the Sidonians, and he went and served Baal and worshipped him. Then he set up an altar for Baal in the temple of Baal, which he had built in Samaria. And Ahab made a wooden image. Ahab did more to provoke the Lord God of Israel to anger than all the kings of Israel who were before him. In his days, Hiel of Bethel built Jericho. He laid its foundation with Abiram his firstborn, and with his youngest son Segub he set up its gates, according to the word of the Lord which he had spoken through Joshua the son of Nun. Over the last several lessons, we have been looking at the kings of Israel. We noted that unlike Judah, which reigned from father to son almost exclusively until the Babylonian captivity, that the northern nations were not like that at all. The first dynasty had 2 kings and lasted about 22 years. The second dynasty had 2 kings and lasted about 25 years. We have now come to the third dynasty, the one headed by Omri. It will have more kings in it, 4, but will only rule slightly longer, about 40 years, before Israel's 4th and longest dynasty would take over. The likely reason for all the political chaos is the idolatry that Israel lived in and the punishment for that idolatry by God. Back when God allowed the kingdom to be rent in 2, that didn't demand idolatry. But that's what Israel started doing and hasn't stopped since. Israel's 6th king, Omri, is described as the worst of all thus far. God judges nations for their sins and is involved in raising up and bringing down leaders. Now, let's not take that to mean that whomever is the leader of our country, that God necessarily chose that leader, though he could have. For God can simply allow a nation to choose its own ruler, even a bad one. But make no mistake, God does rule in the affairs of men, and it certainly appears as if he was ruling pretty heavy-handedly in the leaders of Israel thus far in their history. Looking at our timeline now, we note that Omri reigned 12 years until about 870 BC, which coincides with the first year of the reign of Jehoshaphat. We're now going to again shift our chart up to show the passage of time, this time placing the 31st year of the reign of Asa at the top of the chart, which is 881 BC, and coincides with the beginning of the reign of Omri. Why did we do this? Well, because even though Omri reigns for about 12 years to 870 BC, in the first year of the reign of Jehoshaphat, Ahab, Omri's son, begins his reign in the 38th year of Asa, king of Judah, which is about 874 BC. This means that for a period of 4 to 4.5 years, Ahab was co-regnant with his father, Omri. This would later be internally confirmed when Jehoshaphat is said to have begun his reign not in the 12th year of the reign of Omri, but in the 4th year of the reign of Ahab. Now you might ask, why was Ahab reigning with his father? Well, the scriptures, again, do not say, but let's recall that it was Omri who moved the capital of Israel from Shechem and Tirzah to Samaria in about the 6th year of his reign, which is around the time this co-regnancy began. So perhaps Omri had Ahab remain in Tirzah and help him reign from there while he set up the capital in Samaria. And then, when Omri died, Ahab became king fully outright. That is speculation, of course, so let's not be dogmatic about it, but the scriptures do outline another co-regnancy here. Ahab reigned over Israel and Samaria for 22 years, tying him for the second longest reign thus far with Jeroboam, which will ultimately bring our timeline down to about 853 BC at the time of Ahab's death. Of all the kings of Israel outside of Jeroboam, Ahab is probably the most famous. He was married to Jezebel of the Sidonians, whose name lives in infamy for her evil deeds. Ahab would have numerous run-ins with God's prophet Elijah throughout his reign. And because of these run-ins, of all of the kings of Israel, Ahab had a real chance to turn his life around and the nation around. But he didn't. The scriptures say that he did evil in the sight of the Lord more than all who went before him. And that's saying something, because Omri was worse than all who came before him. And now Omri's son Ahab is worse than that. Sin just keeps on piling up, something we will see in the rest of our study of 1 Kings. In Samaria, Ahab built a temple to Baal, one of the gods of the Phoenicians, showing us that now Israel isn't simply serving a corruption of the true God of heaven, they're now serving gods of other peoples as well. In this, it is said that Ahab did more to provoke the Lord God than any of the kings who went before him. It would also be during the reign of Ahab that the walls of the city of Jericho would be rebuilt. In Joshua 6:26, after the walls of Jericho came down, Joshua curses anyone who tries to rebuild the city, which meant its walls for fortification. This curse was pronounced almost 500 years before, and from the time that Joshua spoke those words to the time of Ahab, there doesn't appear to have been any walled city on the site of Jericho. Sure, we have come across Jericho sparingly since then, but not as a walled city. The site itself was given to the tribe of Benjamin. However, by this time the land seemed to be in the land that belonged to Israel in the north. When exactly this change took place, we don't know, perhaps close to the division of the kingdom, when Bethel, another city given to Benjamin, was also found to be in the possession of the northern tribes. Regardless, Hiel of Bethel was the one in the days of Ahab that rebuilt the city. However, doing so cost Hiel his oldest and youngest sons, just as the prophecy spoken by Joshua said it would back in Joshua 6:26. Even in this godless nation, this nation that served other gods, the true God of heaven wasn't left without witness. The book of Joshua had long been written by the days of Ahab, containing the prophecy about Jericho, and yet Hiel disregarded it anyway. Did Hiel know of this prophecy? Perhaps, but perhaps not. Ignorance, though, wasn't going to save him, for he should have known from the history of Israel had he only inquired of the word of the true God of heaven. What we learn from this is that God says what he means and means what he says. Even if something was spoken 500 years before or 5,000 years before, it doesn't matter. God does not lie, and his word will be carried out. With that, our time is up for today. We will be taking our 3-week summer break and will return, the Lord willing, on Monday, August 21st, 2023. When we return, we'll take up with 1 Kings chapter 17, verses 1 to 16. We hope that you'll come back and join us for that discussion, when we will continue our walk through the Bible, one verse at a time. Thank you for watching today's episode. We hope that you found it edifying and ask that you not only subscribe to our channel and podcast, but that you like and share this episode among your friends, so that the saving gospel of Jesus Christ can go out to the whole world.